how much should you pay for a pair of speakers, a mic, a Bluetooth intercom unit, and some mounts to attach all that to your helmet? To me, $70 sounds too good to be true because I paid $270 in 2021 and it stung like a vaccine shot back then. A month ago, ASMAX sent me their Bluetooth communication system for motorcycle helmets and said, be brutally honest. So I decided to put them through 3 real-world riding tests. The results might surprise you. Since I knew everything about my Sena, I started with the ASMAX S1 for a solo riding test. But the quality of music playback instantly felt so much better that I had to switch back to my Sena to make sure I was hearing it right. I couldn't stick a recorder between the speakers and my ears. So here's a simulation in a Mustang at 70 miles an hour, windows rolled down. Now, the contender. Next was navigation, and things got really interesting. See this CarPlay screen here? I use it because my Sena navigation prompts were so faint that I kept missing my turns. But the ASMAX navigation prompts are so clear that honestly, I don't need the screen to distract me anymore. And it switches quite well between navigation prompts and music.
In a half mile, use the right lane to take exit 101A towards Stanford.
However, my S20's jog dial is much more intuitive than fiddling with the S1's buttons, especially with gloves on. Although I would agree that S1's tactile buttons are easier to use than F1's stealthy ones. You could argue that I have 4 years of Sena muscle memory. That's probably why I tried the ASMAX voice command system that's activated when you say, "Hi Max,
Coming.
music on."
Okay.
It interfaces with your phone's voice assistant, in my case, Apple's Siri. You can perform all the functions that the buttons can, but every now and then, Siri ignored my request. On the S20 Evo as well, you can attempt summoning Siri by hitting the call button, and if she's in a good mood, she'll maybe change the music for you. If you are more popular with the AI chicks than I am, well, you might get better results. Jokes apart, not having to look down for navigation and eliminating the need to fiddle with the controls also adds a safety element. But as a Sena veteran, I was convinced it'll win hands down on my favorite feature, its incredible noise cancellation. I've actually taken work calls over the Sena without ever getting caught. Not that I'm encouraging that kind of behavior, but here's a demonstration. This is me FaceTiming my wife using the Sena. So I am now calling you from my Sena S20
Evo. Can you hear wind noise? My windshield is open.
And this is me with ASMAX.
This is me calling you with my ASMAX F1. I'm riding pretty fast with my visor open. Can you hear any wind noise?
For solo riding, the S1 performed so much better that it made me wonder if there was a solution for my Sena's low audio levels. I did find one, but if you have an S20 like me, you may not like it. But even before we get to problem solving, I wanted to test the rider to passenger communication. And for that, I had another challenge to overcome, connecting ASMAX with Sena. The ASMAX manual says universal pairing, but doesn't specify the correct mode for Sena. So I tried universal mode on both. When that didn't work, I wrote an email to ASMAX support. The next day they replied, S1 in universal pairing, S20 in phone pairing.
Start pairing. Universal pairing. Universal connected.
And voila! Wife and I had a connection after 14 years of marriage. We switched helmets to test both directions. Initially, the voice quality felt comparable, but at highway speeds, the ASMAX's audio advantage was way more obvious. Then we tried ASMAX to ASMAX connection because they sent me a pair of S1s and their upgraded F1 model, which offers longer battery life, higher water resistance, and stealthy buttons for a higher price tag. By the way, battery life on both units is pretty good. For continuous runs, I rode 6 hours with the F1 and 4 hours with the S1 and had 70 and 60% left at the end of it. A few days ago, on my way back from a trail ride, I got rained on for over an hour, and the S1 handled the dreaded Florida downpour like a champ. Within brand, it's obviously way easier to connect, and audio quality was incredible right from get-go all the way to highway speeds. We could both listen to music and use Intercom, but no music sharing at the time of testing. My wife and I don't exactly share a taste in music, but we agreed the ASMAX audio quality was undeniable. But the real test was, how good is it going to be for rider-to-rider communication? Even if it maintained the audio quality edge, the ultimate test and tiebreaker would be the range of the connection, especially in the real world full of cars, trees, and the friendly neighborhood bears in Florida. So I had my wife stand next to a lake full of gators while I rode away to measure the distance where we lost connection. First test, S1 to S20, lost connection at about 600 feet, and that felt a bit odd. Back in 2016, my riding buddy and I used to ride with our Senas on Intercom pairing mode. We never really measured the range, but I remember it to be a lot more than that. So I thought maybe the cross-brand range is lower. So let's test the ASMAX to ASMAX range. But the results only improved by about 100 feet. S1 to F1 range was also the same. So I thought a Sena to Sena range comparison in the same riding conditions would be a real moment of truth. But there's a tiny hiccup. My riding buddy and I don't live in the same country anymore. But then I remembered I used to hoard old gear and accessories in a riding nostalgia box in the hopes of needing it one day. Well, guess what? The day had arrived and I found my Sena SMH10 from 2016. Charged it for a few hours and voila, it came to life. Excitedly connected it with the S20 Evo and ran the same test. Wife was still uneaten by the sharks, but the real disappointment was that the Sena to Sena test in the exact same location proved that my memory was actually colored with positive bias. The nostalgia of my group riding days may have something to do with it, but the fact remains the ranges are actually not that different. Both brands claim longer ranges, which tells me they're probably measuring them in test locations without any obstacles. Most reviews end here because who cares about the long run in this world of TikToks? But if your hard-earned money matters to you, there are 3 more things to consider. Number 1, build quality. Sena is undoubtedly solid. I've used the SMH10 for 5 years and the S20 for about 4. Wear and tear signs are obvious but acceptable. I've only had the ASMAX units for a month. They don't feel fragile, but at least at the moment, I couldn't call them as tough as my Senas. Although you could argue that's 9 years of brand loyalty talking, and you'd be right. And that brings me to point number 2, reliability. I had to replace my Sena SMH10's speaker, mic, bass unit as a kit after 3 years of usage for about $40. The S20 Evo has had 0 issues so far. But here's the problem. 4 weeks with ASMAX versus 9 years with Senas isn't a fair fight. So I checked the Amazon reviews. 4.3 stars, lots of love for audio quality, some complaints about charging and pairing issues. Which brings me to point number 3, customer support. I contacted them for 2 things, the pairing issue with my Sena and my questions about the range, which turned out to be my own faulty memory. In all of those interactions, I got really impressed with their promptness and willingness to help. But then I thought, of course they would do that. They sponsored this. But customers who, unlike me, did not get it for free are also saying similar things about their customer support's promptness and willingness to help. However, I do think their instructional videos are easier to follow than the user manuals, so I'll link them in the description. By the way, you must keep the firmware updated. They're actually releasing an update later in November that will enable music sharing as well. Which reminds me, while I was updating the ASMAX firmware, I figured might as well update my Sena and see if that fixes the audio. Well, that didn't work. Turns out S20 Evo speakers are visibly thinner and weaker than ASMAX. I could pay $40 to upgrade my Sena S20 Evo with HD speakers, which are standard on the new models now. But that to me is a hard sell given the S1's competitive price point for the whole thing and a 2 years warranty. So which one's better? Well, that's the wrong question. The real question is, what are you actually paying for? 4 years ago, when I spent $270, I was paying for confidence and peace of mind. That was worth it to me back then. But after this testing, the premium for confidence feels a little expensive. The ASMAX, on the other hand, sounds better, navigates better, does everything I need for a third of the price. The only thing it cannot prove at the moment is whether it'll last 4 years. So if I was buying today, I would place a calculated bet. I would use the 30-day return period, test the hell out of it, and trust my own judgment. Even if it breaks in 2 years, I could buy another one and still be $100 ahead. I would love to know in the comments, what would you do? Pay the premium for the peace of mind or give a shot to the underdog? If this comparison helped you, hit the subscribe button to watch my personal gear reviews coming up in the next few weeks. In the meantime, you can watch this video, which is just as thorough. This is Faraz, helping you with your due diligence, one video at a time.